Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to BlackLogic. This one really had me stirred up a bit. Usually I will go around 6:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, but I had to jump in very quickly to really chime in on this particular subject because I think it's very important that we dispel lies. And I think that Ilhan Omar and some Somalis, not all, whether it be Somalis in America or Somali Americans, they are really promoting a harmful injustice to foundational Black Americans, and let alone Americans, because they're poking not just the bear, they're poking the lion, they're poking the cheetah, they're poking every single thing imaginable that will, again, tear them to shreds and tear them apart. Because, again, at the end of the day, there's a lot of laws on the books that President Trump could use to revoke a lot of people's statuses, no matter what they are, with the exception of people who've probably been here maybe about 3 or 4 generations. They're probably safe. But a lot of Somalis, especially in Minnesota, are not going to have any safety net with the rhetoric that has been spewing. And again, I want to point out, because I know some people are short-winded, short-minded, short-sighted. I'm not talking about all Somalis, but I'm talking about those who have been denigrating not only the 14th Amendment that was meant for foundational Black Americans and what our ancestors fought for, died for, and bled for. Not only that, but that some of them are even stating that Minnesota, out of all states, was promised to them in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3,000 some odd years ago. And we're going to break it down. We won't be here long, I promise you. I tend to try to get in and out about 20, somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need all day to prove a point, because we're going to dispel a lot of these lies. And before I get into it, let's just go ahead and start with the first slide, okay? Let's start with the first slide right here.
To the Somalis 3,000 years ago, and I got proof. In this video alone, I'm going to show you the evidence as to why Minnesota is their native land. So as we should all know by now, some of the first early settlers of Minnesota were actually Somali explorers. They came to Minnesota and actually set up one of the first early civilizations. And as you can see here, this is a picture of the Somali founding fathers of Minnesota. Even this guy here, he's still Somali, he's just half Yemeni. And as well, we can quite clearly see the Somali flag waving in the background. And as you can see from the old Minnesota flag, it is very, very similar to the Somali flag. They got similar color schemes, they just covered the star up. But in the year 2024, they actually changed the Minnesota flag to resemble more of a Somali flag. Reason being, they were scared of losing the history and the culture of Minnesota. And the new flag was actually designed by a non-Somali called Andrew Pekuri. However, that being said, this man most likely does have Somali ancestry, because as we know, some of the most famous Minnesotans ever actually do seem to have a mix of Somali admixture within their DNA, which actually isn't too far-fetched considering the fact that they've been here for so long, and that was promised to them 3,000 years ago. And if you disagree, then you're anti-Cushitic. Minnesota was promised to the Somalis 3,000 years ago, and I got proof. In this video alone, I'm going to show you the evidence as to why Minnesota is the native.
Yeah, I just wanted that to play because the hypocrisy in this. Now, America has a very strange habit of letting people rewrite its founding documents as long as the lie sounds poetic enough. And lately, we've been hearing something wild, that the 14th Amendment was meant for Somalis, that the Bible promised Minnesota to Somalians, that Black Americans are just guests while immigrants are heirs to this land. So this afternoon, we're shutting down all of these and dispelling these lies with history, law, and receipts, because scripture doesn't override the Constitution and mythology doesn't beat lineage. So let's talk about it, because Ilhan Omar has repeatedly framed that America, specifically Minnesota, as a place of destiny for Somalians, not just opportunity, inheritance, but an online and in-community rhetoric that the message mutates into something more dangerous, that the Bible promised this land. Somalis have a divine claim, and that the 14th Amendment protects us, specifically us. So let's be clear about it, because this is not theology, this is not law, this is not history. This is myth making, and myth making is how people justify displacement. And God didn't draft U.S. citizenship. Black Americans did under terror. So let's read the room when it comes to some of the claims that some of the Somalis are making. And the record, the 14th Amendment back in 1868 was written for one reason and one reason only: to override the Dred Scott decision, which said that Black Americans had no rights a white man was bound to respect. It did four things, ladies and gentlemen. It made formerly enslaved Black people citizens. It guaranteed birthright citizenship. It forced states to respect due process. And it protected equal protection under the law. This wasn't about immigrants. This wasn't about refugees. This wasn't about Somalians. This was about anyone who arrived voluntarily. This wasn't about anyone who just arrived voluntarily, as we named them as immigrants. It was about Black people already here, whether it be Aboriginal Blacks or those of us who were brought over on slave ships. This was about being brutalized and stateless and hunted by the government that had enslaved us. The 14th Amendment isn't a welcome mat. It's a blood contract. So when I hear people state that the 14th Amendment was for them, it's totally disrespectful. And here's the thing. There was a lot of foundational Black Americans that voted for Kamala, which they, in some regards, were voting for immigration, whether it be legal or illegal. Now I'm hearing some of those same foundational Black Americans like, whoa, wait a minute. They're not for immigration anymore, or mass immigration or illegal immigration. I want those people to come out and be public about their stance of Somalians, some, and Ilhan Omar stating that the 14th Amendment, out of all amendments, was for them, and that Minnesota, out of all states, was given to them by the Bible. Now, again, I'm off script here, ladies and gentlemen, because they got me fired up, not emotional, just fired up and expired about this. Let's listen in.
It was promised to us Somalis 3,000 years ago. And if you disagree, you're an anti-Christian bigot, and you need help immediately. Also, if you read Genesis 12:3, it says that those who bless Somalis will be blessed, and those who try to harm them will bring harm upon themselves. I didn't say that. Genesis 12:3. Just saying. Minnesota was promised to us Somalis.
So some of the first questions that I know that a lot of you guys are probably asking is, what's in Genesis 12:3? Is Somali actually mentioned in Genesis 12:3? Let's look at it very quickly. This is Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. The Lord has said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. Let me blow this up. I will make your name great, and I will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, of course, that's not given a full context. Usually you have to read a chapter before and a chapter after in the Bible in order to get the whole story in the context they're in. But I was just trying to look for Somalia. Let me check. I'll do a control F. How about that? I'll do a control F. Okay. And I'm gonna look up Somalia. I don't see Somalians in chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. I don't see it, ladies and gentlemen. So I did a little bit of research because I wanted to know, when they were talking about this land, what landmass are they referring to in chapter 12 in Genesis, verse 1 through 3, or just verse 3 as he stated? What land was he referring to? Now, a lot of you biblical scholars who read your Bible, who profess on the word, pray on your word, I know that you guys know that this is referring to the land of Canaan. Okay, so this is referring to the land of Canaan. And if you guys are not familiar, when it came to Canaan, what lands are referenced in that region? Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank. Okay, so just because a lot of us haven't taken geography in such a long time, I popped up Google Maps for you guys. Don't worry about it, okay? I popped up Google Maps because I wanted to know, where was Somalia, as we see here on the Horn of Africa. Those countries on the Horn of Africa are referencing usually Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, and Eritrea. But now when I look at the countries that supposedly was the land of Canaan during biblical times, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Israel. Now, this is not even close. Somalia is all the way down here, the capital of Somalia, Mogadishu. It's like, I don't know, a couple of thousand miles away. Okay, I'm speculating, a couple of thousand miles away. So the claims, again, the lies, the manipulation, the propaganda, this doesn't fare well for Somalians in Minnesota, let alone in New Orleans and all the other places that they have these little hubs of Somalians, because yeah, they roughly have 100,000 Somalians in the Minnesota area. They may have 50,000 in New Orleans in different regions. So again, I don't know every single place, but those are the hotbeds of where most of Somalians is. And not all Somalis are speaking this way, but enough of them are for Americans, black, white, and indifferent, to pay attention and speak out on it. So again, I'm just kind of giving you guys evidence, because I'm not trying to bash anybody, but I am going to dispel lies and manipulation and propaganda.
Those of us who are Somali in this country see ourselves as Americans. That's what our passport says. That's what our nationality is. And we know that we are protected by the 14th Amendment. We know that we're not going anywhere. And we know that we are protected by the 14th Amendment.
Now, how are they? Now, the reason why they're saying they're protected by the 14th Amendment, let's cover that very quickly as well. Now, she must be talking about Somalians who were born here, not Somalis who immigrated here, who are first generation, second generation. Well, second generation were born here, but not first generation. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. I don't see anything that provides Somali immigrants protection under the 14th Amendment of birthright citizenship. But this is the claim that a lot of Somalis are making by the way of Ilhan Omar, okay? I want to make sure that I point out that all Somalis are not saying this.
And people of Somali descent in your state, but the president has been very focused, not just on them, but on you. In this extraordinary cabinet meeting, he said Somalis, quote, come from hell. They complain and they do nothing but bitch. Take a listen.
These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. We don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it. Thank you very much.
That knocking is vehement agreement from his cabinet members there. I just wonder what the reaction is in your district to have that from the highest office in the land.
It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. These are Americans that he is calling garbage. And we feel like there is an unhealthy obsession that he has on the Somali community, and an unhealthy and creepy obsession that he has with me. I think it is also really important for us to remember that this kind of hateful rhetoric and this level of dehumanizing can lead to dangerous actions by people.
That's absolutely true. And some of the rhetoric that she spoke of could lead to dangerous actions as well. See, no immigrant group can be president of the United States of America. You have to have a long lineage in America to be president of the United States. But you can be a congressperson, you can be a senator, okay? You can be part of different sorts of the government body altogether in order to hold office. But they can never attain to be president, okay, unless they were born in America, so to speak. But a lot of people are now looking back on a lot of the laws and policies that we have, that if you are third, second, or first generation immigrant, that you would never be president, that you shouldn't even hold political office, whether you be a senator or a congressperson. So that's in the work in it too. They're actually trying to create bills that are going to prevent immigrants who are first, second, and third generation from holding office and let alone be president. Now, people would state that America is a land of immigrants. It's not. A lot of immigrants came to America, but America was built by foundational Black Americans. The white European power structure are the ones who established America by eradicating a lot of Black Aboriginal as well as Native Americans, who are the Mongolian red type Native Americans who have lighter skin color to a certain degree. But nonetheless, these are the three different main groups: foundational Black Americans, Native Americans, the Europeans that came over and settled in so-called pilgrims that killed off a lot of Native American and their tribes. These are the three major groups that established America. Not all these immigrants that come from Italy and Ireland and Africa and the Caribbean and Asia. No, they came after America was already established, after America was already built up on the backs of blacks. So when I see different groups using the same legislation and amendments that my forefathers and ancestors voted for and use it as if their claim to fame, this is highly disrespectful. Now, yes, let's talk about it. Immigrants, they do benefit from the 14th Amendment today. So do tourist babies. And that's one of the things that President Trump stated. And again, as people will say, because on some deportation and illegal immigration issues, I believe majority of Americans who've been here from the dawn of time aligned with President Trump. That don't mean you like him. That don't mean you voted for him, but you may align with his deportation policies, because a lot of people come over here on tourist visas while they're pregnant in order for their children to be Americans. And what does that anchors them in, and they use legislation for them to become citizens themselves. This is one of the old tactics that a lot of immigrant groups absolutely use. So they use tourist babies, they use diplomat children. But benefiting from a law is not the same as being the reason it exists. Black Americans are the source code. Everyone else is a patch update, in my opinion. You don't get to erase the origin story just because you arrive later and learn how to use the system faster. Using the ladder doesn't mean you built the house. Now, let's address the most reckless claim of all, that Scripture promised Minnesota to Somalians. As we went over Genesis 12:3 or 1-3, I still to this day want to know what Bible verse, what chapter, what prophet, what map. Now, someone in the comment section said that they're talking about the Quran. Of course, the Quran is not the Bible, silly man, because last time I checked, the Bible doesn't mention Minnesota. It doesn't mention America. It doesn't mention Somali. And it definitely doesn't override U.S. constitutional law. So America is made up majority of Christian, right? It's not that it is a Christian nation, because again, we have freedom of religion according to the Constitution. But invoking God to justify political entitlement is not faith. I don't care what religion it is. It's colonial logic in religious drag. When you really get down to the bare bones of it all, it's colonial logic in religious drag. When people can't prove it with history, they hide behind heaven, do they not? This isn't just goofy Facebook talk or YouTube or TikTok talk. This narrative does real damage, because in some regards, it erases foundational Black American lineage. It reframes immigrants as rightful owners. It casts Black Americans as obstacles, and it justifies resource capture. Now, there are some other clips I'm going to share with you guys that I think is utterly important to prove some of the claims that I'm making, but it fuels resentment and displacement. Every empire uses divine language to justify taking land from the people who built it. If God is always on your side, you never have to ask who you are and who you're stepping on. See, Minnesota wasn't revealed by prophecy. It was stolen from the native people. It was built with Black labor, industrialized through Black migration, stabilized by Black tax bases, and protected by Black civil rights law. Somali refugees only arrived in the 1990s, and Black Americans arrived in chains, and the Aboriginals chained together centuries earlier than any other group. That difference actually matters, not morality. Legally, historically, and politically, you can love a place, which I'm pretty sure all the immigrants that come to America, you love America, but you can't thrive in a place. But you don't get to rewrite who paid for it. And I think that's the problem that we're facing right here, right now. Because first and foremost, foundational Black Americans are not visitors. We're not immigrants. We're not wards of the state. We're the only group that has been forced here, bred here, exploited here, and still denied full repair. Every immigrant right you enjoy sits on the top of our constitutional struggle. I'm going to share with you guys some other videos of her speaking in her native tongue of how they plan to steal America. Now, that's a little bit conjecture. Okay, now she's speaking in her native tongue. I know that it's small, so I'm going to read it to you guys, okay? My answer to Somalis was that the U.S. government will only do what Somalians in the U.S. tell them to do. They will do what we want and nothing else. They must follow our orders, and that is how we will safeguard the interests of Somalia. We Somalians must have the confidence in ourselves that we call for the shots in the U.S. We live in the U.S., pay taxes in the U.S., and have a real voice. Now, some people are going to claim in the comment section, like most do, that I'm taking this or people are taking this out of context. The U.S. is a country where one of your daughters, myself, is in Congress to represent your interests, Somalia's interests, Somali's interests. For as long as I'm in Congress, Somalia will never be in danger. Its water, Indian Ocean, by the way, will not be stolen by Ethiopia or others. The U.S. will not dare to support anyone against Somalia to steal our land or oceans. Sleep in comfort, knowing I'm here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. So that was some of the words that she was speaking to a large group of Somalians supposedly in Minnesota. Very publicly, by the way, as if no one's going to interpret that as such. So when I look at this, the rhetoric that she's speaking and the way she spoke it, some people may state that we're going to take this out of context, which is absolutely incorrect. We're going to take it the way she stated it. The house doesn't belong to the newest roommate. You guys just got to America and they believe that they're already calling the shots. And again, not all Somalians, but enough to awaken the mass giant that have been sleeping. And that is when foundational Black Americans and white Americans agree. That is when Latino Americans and any other sort of Americans agree. They have been here for generations upon generations. Now you're going to have everybody out of the woodwork to come for your heads, figuratively speaking, not literally. This isn't about hating immigrants, by the way. The 14th Amendment wasn't written for Somalians. The Bible didn't deem Minnesota to anyone. Maybe the Quran. I didn't read it. And America doesn't belong to whoever shouts destiny the loudest. It belongs legally and historically to the people of America. Whether you were forced here or arrive here to become a democracy. See, I don't argue vibes. We interrogate claims, we defend lineage, and we shut down lies politely or painfully. So again, we need to stay really sharp and on code when we have a lot of these immigrant groups. And see, here's one of the issues that I pointed out to a lot of you guys of the FBA's for Trump video, how I wasn't providing excuses, but clarity. And not that you should agree that foundational Black Americans, a demographic of them voted for President Trump. Again, they were voting based on illegal and mass immigration. Now you see this come to the forefront, and now those who even voted for Kamala Harris, not stating that you voted wrongly, that's your choice. You have the right to vote for whoever you want to vote for. But again, my brothers and sisters who are in Chicago and California, who was voting against illegal immigration, till this day, I still understand why they voted for Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. That wasn't my candidate. My candidate was speaking on reparations, and I already pointed that out. But here's another thing I want you guys to view as well.
Yeah. It's gonna be legendary right here, man.
Let's get it.
Word. My people perish for the lack of knowledge. I'm just here to bring the facts. I'm not worried about your feelings. It's the way that y'all
Now, going over the 14th Amendment one more time. Now, I'm not going to read it again. I'm just going to do a Control F very quickly because I want to look up Somali. I want to look up Somalis. I want to look up Somali. I don't see it. Now, somebody was saying about the Quran. So I will point in the Quran where it doesn't say see Quran that Minnesota, out of all places, was promised to Somalians 3,000 years ago. Quran, let's see, Somalis promise Minnesota. Now, I don't even know if Minnesota was around, let alone Somalians, or the term Somalis was around 3,000 years ago. I wonder if they could use the right terminologies so we can basically, do the research properly. Okay. Now let's read this. I'm reading it real time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not altering or anything. So let's go through this together. Okay. The idea that Minnesota was promised to Somalis in the Quran or any other religious text is false. Now, maybe AI is lying, but AI scrapes the entire internet to fact find a lot of things that we look up. The concept originated as a satirical internet meme created by Somali Americans to parody the narrative of Promised Land, often used in the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict and related political discussions. I'm not going to even read the rest of this because we all know that the claims are asinine, okay? And the only thing that this is going to do that a lot of these Somalians that are in America and Somali Americans, it's really going to make any claim, any points that they try to make very hyperbolic, and people are going to shut it down, will either be true or false on any accounts. So again, this is going to really stir up, and I'm not I'm not promoting it, but they may stir up the wrong group of people to do. I don't even want to say the words, ladies and gentlemen, because I don't want harm to come to any group of people. Okay, I don't care what country they're from, but this is the wrong country to stir up this propaganda, because we have a system of white supremacy that when certain groups buck out bad and you are really small demographic and you really don't have a history of being warriors, you really don't have a history of fighting the system of white supremacy, you really don't have a history of fighting back, you don't have a history of revolution and revolt. Don't get me wrong. There may be small history, but I'm talking about as a collaborative group, because these are things I want you guys to really think about when some of the things that I'm stating. When you look at the nation states in the different countries in Africa that were colonialized by the Europeans, okay, they were colonized by the Europeans. Think about a small, powerful group because of weaponry and military tactics like the Europeans that came over to Africa. I'm not going to give every single point of history. I'm jumping around to get to my point. They get to Africa, and you have these very large demographics of people that live in different regions, but they're not unified where they're fighting against the Europeans, so they won't not alone put their countrymen and women in shackles and chains and make them work for free, but rape, pillage, steal their resources, take over their land, take over their governments. Majority of these African countries gained independence roughly in the 1960s, so not too long ago. But in some regards, we would be Asian powers like China in some regards, and European powers still are the puppet masters of the economics and social welfare of a lot of these countries and how politics are ran. That's why a lot of African countries are still in shambles, not only because they have corrupt governments, it's because the people will not unify. And I don't think that 100% of any group of people will unify and revolt, but not even enough people to change the demographics of their government. Because anytime you say, why are a massive amount of immigrants coming to America? And that's just not Africa, not just Caribbean, but Asia as well, Eastern European countries as well. That is because they believe that their countries are corrupt, and that the governments are just pocketing all the money and not doing anything for the people. And the one question I continue to ask people from all these other countries is, won't the people who are on code unify and revolt against the government? Oh, well, we will be killed. Did you know when you are rebelling? Do you know when you are revolting? Do you know in a revolution, people die? In order to change, there has to be death. That's the only way power is relieved. See, when people just think that you're going to garner power with words, you're going to garner power with empty rhetoric. No, power is only taken, power is not given. So these are people of their own land. I want you to think about that. You were conquered by a smaller, but when it comes to weaponry and military tactics, but you were conquered by a much smaller group than your own countrymen and women. And even in present days, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, you could have easily overthrew the colonial powers that were taking over your country. Yes, people are going to die. That is what happened in revolution. If you're scared to die, then you will always be under the thumb of white supremacy and colonialism. That's the only way you're going to get these things done. So if you're not willing to put a lot of these puppet masters that you state that you're in your government and change the dynamics in the economies in your own government, then the land that you guys are from will never change. And that is why everybody is running to America. Now, granted, I don't agree with Trump probably with 99% of the things that he done, but I think there needs to be the slowing or the decreasement of mass immigration and the total eradication of illegal immigration, because these are some of the things that are spawning out of illegal immigration. Do you guys just remember earlier this year, you had thousands of Latinos protesting on highways in California? This is where we're going at, ladies and gentlemen. So again, they're making Americans who really never sided with each other probably on any political point are now siding with each other, even though we're on the left side, the right side, we're up, we're down, we're left, we're right. But the one thing that we agree on, especially with Ilhan Omar and some of the Somalians speaking a lot of this propaganda and rhetoric, that no American is going to stand for this. So if I'm Somali and I'm in America, one thing I'm going to do is write Ilhan Omar and say, shut the up, okay? That's what I'm going to tell her. Please be quiet. Stop speaking out like this. And she had a law form of Somalians backing her, rooting and champion. This is not the way to go. This is the wrong country to do this. Now, if you was in Great Britain, they're a little bit nicer than Americans. If you was in Canada, good day, Abe. They're a little bit nicer than Americans, but not here in this country. You can't do that in this country. Because when you have foundational Black Americans speaking out against this, when you have white Americans speaking out against this, when you have Latino and Asian Americans speaking out against this, that means you have a large body of Americans who are revolting against this ideology and this thought process that somehow America belonged to Somalians by the way of Minnesota 3,000 years ago, and that you're protected by the 14th Amendment that was meant for enslaved Black Americans who are now citizens. Like, miss me with all of that, okay? And this is just a public service announcement to the Somali Americans that the rhetoric, if it continues, is not going to pan out well. I want you guys to stay safe. I really do. I'm going to read some of your comments. I see one person mainly commenting over here. Okay, he was talking about the Quran. He must be talking about the Quran. That's not a Bible. Okay. See Brenda Smith. Okay, but anyway, that's all I have for you guys. I told you I'd be in and out very quickly. You guys have a great and wonderful day. Don't forget to chime in this evening at 6:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to talk about something else.